Welcome to Warriors of the World. Today we'll be exploring the fascinating history of Yasuke, the African warrior who became the only foreign samurai in feudal Japan. Subscribe now to join our community and support this project. The late 16th century marked a brief but significant period when Japan's doors were slightly ajar to the outside world, allowing limited contact with European traders and missionaries before centuries of isolation would follow. It was during this narrow window of opportunity that one of history's most remarkable cultural crossovers occurred: the arrival of a tall, powerful African man who would rise from curiosity to legend. In the year 1579, the Italian Jesuit missionary Alessandro Valignano arrived at the port of Kyoto as part of his inspection tour of Jesuit missions in the East. Among his entourage was a towering African man whose presence would cause a sensation in a land where foreigners of any kind were rare, and Africans entirely unknown. This man was Yasuke, and his journey from obscurity to the inner circles of Japanese power represents one of history's most extraordinary cultural transitions. The origins of Yasuke remain shrouded in historical uncertainty. Most scholars believe he was likely from Mozambique, though others suggest Ethiopia, Sudan, or other regions of East Africa. What is clear from Japanese accounts is that his physical appearance, his height, muscular build, and especially his skin color, created an immediate sensation in a society that had virtually no contact with Africans. Yasuke's arrival occurred during the Sengoku period, the age of warring states, a time of political upheaval, constant warfare, and shifting alliances among competing daimyo, powerful feudal lords who controlled various regions of Japan. Among these daimyo, one man was steadily consolidating power and moving toward his vision of a unified Japan: Oda Nobunaga, a brilliant military strategist and political visionary whose ambitions would intersect with the destiny of the African newcomer. The initial Japanese reaction to Yasuke reveals much about the isolated nature of Japanese society at this time. Contemporary accounts report that when Yasuke appeared in public, such enormous crowds gathered to see him that several people were crushed to death in the commotion. Some Japanese believed his skin color was painted on, and Valignano's diary entries indicate that local lords insisted the African wash his skin to prove the color was natural. This extraordinary reaction underscores how completely removed Japan had been from the broader world. What might have remained merely an historical curiosity, the first documented African in Japan, would instead develop into something far more significant when news of this unusual foreigner reached the ears of the most powerful warlord in Japan. By 1581, Oda Nobunaga had conquered much of central Japan and established himself as the most powerful daimyo in the land. Known for his military genius, political cunning, and interest in foreign cultures and technologies, Nobunaga had already broken with tradition by embracing European firearms and trading with Portuguese merchants. His open-mindedness toward foreign innovations would extend to people as well. When word reached Nobunaga about the tall African in the Jesuit entourage, his curiosity was immediately piqued. Historical records from Matsudaira Ayatada, a samurai who kept detailed diaries of this period, describe the first meeting between Yasuke and Nobunaga at Honnoji Temple in Kyoto. The warlord was reportedly fascinated by Yasuke's physical presence. Standing approximately 6 feet 2 inches tall, the African towered over most Japanese of the period. According to the Chronicle of Lord Nobunaga, compiled by his official historian Otaguchi, Nobunaga initially suspected that Yasuke's skin was colored with ink. He ordered the African to strip to the waist and scrub his skin, watching with fascination as the color remained unchanged. Far from being offended, Nobunaga was intrigued by this confirmation of Yasuke's unique appearance. What began as curiosity quickly developed into something more substantial. Beyond the initial fascination with Yasuke's physical characteristics, Nobunaga discovered that the African possessed qualities he greatly admired: strength, discipline, intelligence, and loyalty. Most crucially, Yasuke had apparently learned to communicate in Japanese during his time with the Jesuits, allowing for direct conversation between the two men. Jesuit records indicate that Nobunaga's interest in Yasuke was immediate and profound. So impressed was the warlord that he requested Valignano leave Yasuke in his service. For the Jesuits, cultivating favor with the most powerful man in Japan was crucial to their missionary objectives, and they readily agreed to the arrangement. For Yasuke, this transfer would transform his life completely, elevating him from servant to samurai. The relationship that developed between Nobunaga and Yasuke was unusual for 16th-century Japan, where foreigners were typically viewed with suspicion if not outright hostility. Yet Nobunaga, ever the pragmatist and innovator, recognized in Yasuke not just a curiosity but a valuable asset. The African's combination of physical strength, intelligence, and exotic background appealed to Nobunaga's appreciation for the exceptional and the useful. Within a remarkably short period, Yasuke would transition from foreign curiosity to a trusted member of Nobunaga's inner circle, a transformation that would have been unthinkable for nearly any other foreigner in feudal Japan. The elevation of Yasuke from foreign visitor to samurai represents one of the most extraordinary social leaps in Japanese history. The samurai class was typically closed to outsiders, a hereditary warrior caste with specific traditions, training requirements, and codes of conduct. For a foreigner, particularly one of African origin, to enter this elite group was unprecedented and speaks volumes about both Nobunaga's unconventional thinking and Yasuke's exceptional qualities. According to Japanese historical records, Nobunaga awarded Yasuke with a residence, servants, and an income. Most significantly, he granted him the status of samurai and allowed him to wear the two swords, Katana and Wakizashi, that symbolized the samurai class. This honor was extraordinary. Even Japanese commoners could not aspire to such status, much less a foreigner who had arrived in the country just months before. What qualities might have earned Yasuke this remarkable promotion? Contemporary accounts suggest several factors. First was his obvious physical prowess. Standing at least a head taller than most Japanese men of the era and possessing considerable strength, Yasuke made an imposing warrior. Second was his apparent facility with languages. Having already learned Portuguese from the Jesuits, he quickly acquired Japanese, allowing him to communicate directly with Nobunaga and understand commands in battle. Beyond these practical attributes, Jesuit accounts indicate that Yasuke demonstrated intelligence, loyalty, and adaptability, qualities Nobunaga prized highly. The warlord, famous for his meritocratic approach to leadership, recognized talent regardless of background or birth. In Yasuke, he apparently saw someone whose unique combination of strengths could serve him well. Otaguchi's chronicle suggests that Yasuke became a sword-bearer for Nobunaga, a position of significant trust that kept him in close proximity to the warlord. Modern historian Thomas Lockley proposes that Yasuke may have served as a bodyguard, using his imposing physical presence to deter potential assassins. Whatever his precise role, Japanese sources make clear that Yasuke was no mere ornament or curiosity but a functional member of Nobunaga's military organization. The relationship between Nobunaga and Yasuke appears to have transcended the typical master-retainer dynamic. Sources indicate that the warlord enjoyed conversing with Yasuke, perhaps gaining insights into the wider world beyond Japan's shores. For Nobunaga, whose ambitions extended to potential diplomatic and trade relationships with foreign powers, Yasuke represented a valuable window into different cultures and perspectives. For Yasuke himself, the transition to samurai status would have required intensive training in Japanese martial arts, etiquette, and the complex code of bushidō, the way of the warrior that governs samurai conduct. That he apparently mastered these skills sufficiently to earn Nobunaga's continued favor testifies to his remarkable adaptability and determination. As a member of Nobunaga's inner circle, Yasuke witnessed firsthand the dramatic final chapter of the warlord's campaign to unify Japan. The early 1580s found Nobunaga at the height of his power, having defeated most of his significant rivals and established control over the economically vital central regions of Japan. From his magnificent Azuchi Castle, a revolutionary seven-story fortress that symbolized his ambition and vision, Nobunaga directed campaigns against his remaining opponents. Yasuke's daily life during this period would have followed the disciplined routine of a samurai in service to a major daimyo. This included rigorous martial training, attendance at formal audiences, and accompaniment of Nobunaga on official journeys and campaigns. As a personal sword-bearer, he would have remained in close proximity to the warlord, responsible for both ceremonial duties and practical protection. Japanese accounts indicate that Yasuke participated in several of Nobunaga's military campaigns during this period. The Chronicle of Lord Nobunaga specifically mentions his presence during the Battle of Tenmokuzen in 1582, where Nobunaga's forces defeated the Takeda clan. This engagement, one of Nobunaga's final major victories, would have given Yasuke direct experience in Japanese warfare. Beyond the battlefield, Yasuke's presence at Nobunaga's court placed him at the center of Japan's political transformation. He would have witnessed diplomatic audiences with other daimyo, strategic planning sessions, and the elaborate cultural events Nobunaga used to display his power and sophistication. As someone who could move between Nobunaga's Japanese world and the small European community in Japan, Yasuke may have played a role in the warlord's interactions with Portuguese traders and Jesuit missionaries. Yasuke's unique status inevitably generated reaction among the traditional samurai in Nobunaga's service. Some historical accounts suggest initial skepticism or resentment from certain quarters, though Nobunaga's personal endorsement would have largely protected Yasuke from overt challenge. Over time, his evident skills and loyalty appear to have earned respect from his fellow warriors, allowing him to function effectively within the hierarchy of Nobunaga's forces. The question of Yasuke's cultural adaptation remains one of the most fascinating aspects of his story. Did he fully embrace Japanese customs and worldview, or maintain elements of his original identity? The historical record provides limited insight, though his rapid acquisition of language suggests genuine engagement with Japanese culture. Whatever his private thoughts, externally he appears to have successfully navigated the complex expectations of samurai conduct. For approximately 2 years, Yasuke lived this extraordinary existence, an African warrior transformed into a Japanese samurai, serving one of history's most significant Japanese leaders during a pivotal period of national transformation. This remarkable cultural crossing would likely have continued indefinitely, had fate not intervened in the form of one of history's most infamous betrayals. The turning point in Yasuke's Japanese journey came on June 21, 1582, the day of the Honnoji incident, one of the most dramatic events in Japanese history. While staying at Honnoji Temple in Kyoto with a small contingent of guards, Nobunaga was betrayed and attacked by his general Akechi Mitsuhide, who had secretly turned against his lord and surrounded the temple with troops in the early morning hours. According to Japanese accounts, Yasuke was among the small group of warriors present with Nobunaga when the attack began. The Chronicle of Lord Nobunaga and the Shincho Koki both suggest that Yasuke fought valiantly during the initial assault, though the overwhelming numbers of Akechi's forces quickly made the situation hopeless. Recognizing defeat, Nobunaga followed samurai tradition by committing seppuku, ritual suicide, ordering the temple set ablaze to ensure his enemies would not take his head as a trophy. In the chaos of the attack and subsequent fire, Yasuke apparently fought on, perhaps attempting to protect his lord's body or break through enemy lines. Historical records indicate that he was eventually captured by Akechi's forces, creating a dilemma for the rebel general. As a samurai in Nobunaga's service, tradition dictated that Yasuke should be executed or allowed to commit seppuku himself. Yet his unique status as a foreigner complicated matters. According to Ota Guchi's chronicle, Akechi made a fateful and revealing decision. He refused to execute Yasuke, declaring that the African was not Japanese and therefore not subject to the same expectations as a native samurai. Instead, he ordered Yasuke returned to the Jesuits at their church in Kyoto. This decision, while sparing Yasuke's life, effectively stripped him of the samurai status Nobunaga had granted him. Akechi's treatment of Yasuke provides fascinating insight into the limitations of cultural integration in 16th-century Japan. Despite Yasuke's apparent adoption of samurai customs and his recognized service to Nobunaga, his foreign origin remained an inescapable marker of difference in the eyes of more traditional Japanese leaders. What Nobunaga had recognized as strength and distinctive value, Akechi dismissed as alien and outside the Japanese social order. The historical record falls largely silent on Yasuke after his return to the Jesuits. Some scholars speculate that he may have remained in Japan for some time, perhaps serving as a translator or guard for the mission. Others suggest he may have left Japan entirely, returning to missionary activities elsewhere in Asia or possibly making his way back to Africa or Europe. In the absence of clear documentation, his fate after Nobunaga's death remains one of history's intriguing mysteries. What is certain is that the death of Nobunaga marked the end of Yasuke's documented role as a samurai. The warlord who had recognized his value and elevated him to unprecedented status was gone, and with him the extraordinary cultural experiment that had placed an African warrior at the heart of Japanese power politics. To fully appreciate the significance of Yasuke's experience in Japan, we must consider the broader historical context in which his remarkable journey occurred. The late 16th century represented a unique moment of potential openness in Japanese history, a brief window before the country's retreat into more than 2 centuries of self-imposed isolation under the Tokugawa shogunate. Yasuke arrived in Japan during what historians call the Christian century, approximately 1549 to 1650, when Portuguese traders and Jesuit missionaries had established a small but significant presence in the country. This period saw the introduction of European firearms, which revolutionized Japanese warfare, as well as exposure to Western science, art, and religion. Thousands of Japanese converted to Christianity during these decades, including some prominent daimyo. Oda Nobunaga's attitudes toward foreigners and foreign ideas were exceptionally progressive for his time. Unlike many of his contemporaries, he saw potential advantages in selective adoption of useful foreign elements, particularly military technology. His interest in Yasuke reflected this broader openness to external influences that might strengthen his position or advance his ambitions. However, Nobunaga's death and the subsequent rise to power of Toyotomi Hideyoshi and later Tokugawa Ieyasu would gradually reverse this trend toward openness. By the early 1600s, Christianity had been banned, foreign influence strictly limited, and Japan had embarked on its Sakoku, closed country, policy that would persist until the mid-19th century. Had Yasuke arrived in Japan even 20 years later, his reception and opportunities would likely have been dramatically different. The story of Yasuke also intersects with the broader history of Africans in Asia during this period. Portuguese expansion into the Indian Ocean and beyond had created new patterns of human movement, with Africans serving as sailors, soldiers, traders, and slaves throughout Portuguese maritime networks. African guards and servants were not uncommon in Portuguese enclaves in India, China, and Southeast Asia. Yasuke may have originally entered this system through enslavement or voluntary service before his journey to Japan. Equally significant is the Japanese social context of Yasuke's elevation to samurai status. The samurai class had evolved over centuries as a hereditary warrior elite with specific privileges, responsibilities, and cultural practices. The bestowal of samurai status on a foreigner represented a remarkable breach of traditional boundaries, possible only because of Nobunaga's exceptional authority and unconventional thinking. Yasuke's story thus occupies a unique historical intersection, a moment when Japan's traditional social structures encountered both internal reform under Nobunaga and external influence through European contact. This confluence of circumstances created the possibility for his unprecedented cultural crossing, one that would become increasingly unimaginable as Japan moved toward isolation in subsequent decades. Though his time in the spotlight of Japanese history was brief, Yasuke's legacy has proven remarkably enduring. His story represents one of history's most extraordinary cultural crossings, an African who not only visited feudal Japan but achieved integration into its elite warrior class, if only temporarily. This remarkable narrative has resonated across cultures and centuries, gaining particular prominence in recent decades. In Japan, Yasuke's memory persisted in various forms after his disappearance from historical records. Children's books from the Edo period mention the Black Samurai as a curious historical figure, while oral traditions in certain regions maintained legends of his strength and military prowess. Though often presented more as exotic curiosity than historical figure, these references ensured that knowledge of the African samurai never completely vanished from Japanese cultural memory. Modern interest in Yasuke's story has grown significantly since the late 20th century. Japanese historians such as Fujita Midori have conducted detailed research into primary sources mentioning the African samurai, helping to separate historical fact from legend. International scholars, particularly Thomas Lockley and Geoffrey Gerard, have further expanded academic understanding of Yasuke's life and context through careful analysis of Jesuit records and Japanese chronicles. Beyond academic circles, Yasuke's story has captured the imagination of creative artists across multiple media. Children's books, novels, manga, and anime have all featured interpretations of the African samurai, ranging from historically grounded accounts to highly fictionalized adventures. A major biographical novel by Kurusu Yoshio, published in 1968, helped revive popular interest in Yasuke's story in post-war Japan. The 21st century has seen particular acceleration in Yasuke's cultural presence. Major film and television projects based on his life have been announced by international studios, while video games and comic series have incorporated his character. This surge of creative engagement reflects both increased historical awareness of diverse figures and contemporary interest in stories that cross traditional cultural boundaries. What explains the enduring fascination with Yasuke's story? Beyond its inherent dramatic appeal, his experience resonates with contemporary conversations about cultural identity, integration, and the complexity of historical race relations. As a figure who crossed seemingly impermeable boundaries, Yasuke offers a powerful counterexample to assumptions about historical isolation between African and Asian cultures. For modern Japan, with its relatively homogeneous population and ongoing navigation of globalization, Yasuke's story provides an interesting historical precedent for cultural openness and diversity. For African diasporic communities, His achievement of high status in 16th-century Japan offers an empowering historical narrative that expands understanding of the global African presence beyond traditional European-focused slave trade narratives. Perhaps most significantly, Yasuke's story challenges simplistic understandings of pre-modern societies as uniformly closed and xenophobic. His acceptance by Nobunaga demonstrates how individual relationships and recognitions of merit could sometimes transcend the powerful social boundaries of class, race, and culture, even in historical contexts where such boundaries were typically rigid and rarely crossed. The African samurai thus remains not merely a fascinating historical curiosity but a figure whose experiences continue to inspire reflection on human capacity for adaptation and cultural exchange across seemingly insurmountable differences, a legacy far more significant than Yasuke himself could likely have imagined as he first set foot on Japanese shores nearly 4.5 centuries ago. Subscribe now, become a member, turn on notifications, share this video with your friends, and leave a comment so we can compare our knowledge and sources. Thank you for following our channel. Until our next strategic journey, here at Warriors of the World.